everybody, Jillian here. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you a travel album that I created for a 2-week road trip that my family and I took in February of 2016. And if you remember, probably back in January of this year, I created a video showing everything that I was going to take on my trip with me in a little 9x12-ish box because I thought that I was going to be able to work on this while on the road. That is hilarious now. Future Jill laughs at that because that did not happen. Actually create this on the road. It's at the time I'm sharing this, it's November 2016, so about 9 months after our trip, I feel comfortable enough to call this pretty much done and go ahead and share this with you guys. So this is a 6x8 album from Studio Calico 7 Paper Company, and it has a pretty big spine. I want to say this is at least 2.5 inches. And I used mostly Ali Edwards story stamps and Kelly Purkey travel stamps and things like that to complete this. I also used some messy boxes from A Beautiful Mess, and I'll go through and kind of point out what's what and as I go through this, and then link as much as I can in the description below. So it is a very full 6x8 album, and in the book plate here I used the Drive story stamp from Ali Edwards to stamp out stories from the road, and then I noted the cities that we visited, although we did not go to New York, so I need to change this. DC, Philadelphia, and New York, even though we really only went to New Jersey. So what I did do while on the road was keep these notes. So on here is basically everything that we did, and I just documented it at the end of each day. I just wrote little notes of where we were, where we stayed. I even drew out a little diagram here while on the way back home of what I wanted things to look like in the album. So this is as much as I got done on the trip. This, and I created an album on my iPhone, and I put my favorite pictures from the day in it at the end of each day. And that's pretty much all I did while on the road. That's all I had time for. So, you know, months later when I was completing this, I just looked through my notes here and was able to complete the album. I had the photos printed at Walmart, and they use a great photo paper that's great for stamping, and I ordered those probably like 2 days after we got back and had those in hand within 2 days of coming back, because while on the trip I was going through the photos and selecting which ones I wanted to use. So this is the intro page for the album. I just cut down a piece of pattern paper to 6x8, and then in Google I noted each city, or roughly each address, where we stayed while on our trip. So we here are starting out at home, and then this little blue line kind of follows our route back. I used some of the post-it notes from Kelly Purkey that look like this to create this down here, and used some stamps of hers, and just kind of stamped this. And then I noted the big states that we visited, that we did the most in: DC, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So just, I have a bunch of 6x8 photos in here. Persnickety Prints had a deal when we got back, and they had free shipping on 20 prints and some kind of sale. So I went ahead and took advantage of that and printed out my favorite photos in 6x8. So this is just us in front of our car, a snapshot of what our trunk looked like traveling with a 14-month-old at the time. Definitely meant we had like 3 times as much stuff as we would have if it was just the 2 of us. And you'll see a lot of things from the Ali Edwards Drive story kit also, like this card. So I used a lot of stamps and kind of embellished the journal cards that way. This journal card here is from In a Creative Bubble. I'm not sure what release it's called, what the release is called, but I'll go ahead and link it below once I find it. And then this rubber banner is from the story kit. I had a lot of 4x6 photos in here that didn't necessarily fit into the spread, so I would put it in the middle. This is a piece of pattern paper from Basic Gray, and what I did was cut maybe a 2x5 inch strip of paper, folded it in half, stapled it, and then punched holes in it so that it kind of reinforced the pocket here. And then I also used the New Adventures stamp set and stamped on white cardstock here, and then used a tiny attacher throughout the album here. This is a stamp from Studio Calico, just noting the weather when we got to our first stop on Amelia Island. And then I just used some alpha stickers, and this was one of my favorite things that I did in the album for journaling. So what I would do, I don't know if you can tell on this card here, but I would use a 4x6 filler card, and then I did my journaling on top attaching a piece of vellum and then just drawing lines and then getting my journaling down. Because I really wanted to use like patterned cards and things like that, and I wanted to be able to see the pattern underneath it. So I adhered that with some washi tape and used a wood button from Chamel. Same thing here with the basic gray paper and stapling it down. This is a label from the Clearly Kelly Stampin' Cut collection, or stamp set. I also have a lot of ephemera included in this album, so this is just our dinner order written down that night when I was visiting with my aunt and uncle. I think that's my cousin's handwriting. And then I have some thickers here on the outside of the page protector. Bojangles is someplace that I always go when I'm visiting the Carolinas. Cajun filet biscuit and cheerwine for breakfast. That's what I indulge in every time I'm in the Carolinas. So just some filler cards from A Beautiful Mess. I'm not sure where this stamp is from. It says coffee needed. I'm almost positive it's a Kelly Purkey stamp. This journal card is from the Allie Edwards Drive Story Kit. Here's the New Adventures stamp, just stamped on cardstock again. So I used one of these journal cards from In a Creative Bubble every single day and kind of talked about what we were doing, and there are maybe 12 different colors. So I just picked colors that matched the photo for that day. So here we are in Virginia, and I talked about, you know, how it was so cold outside. It was in the teens that when my coffee spilled onto my glove, it actually froze. Just things like that. And then I also included a lot of screenshots. So Valentine's Day is my wedding anniversary, so I included in here just a card that my mother-in-law had given us, some journaling about what we did, and a photo of us at the Air and Space Museum. Here's another screenshot. This is something that I tried to do throughout the trip, just to be mindful of snapping what the weather was each city that we visited. And I didn't use it every single day, but I used it mostly for each city that we visited. This is just a big letter L that I did my journaling on, talking about L is for layers, and then just took some pictures of my son and all of the 3 layers that we put him in since it was so cold out. And then here again are those alphas from an old Messy Box subscription at the Air and Space Museum here. And then this lemon, I think, is from an older Studio Calico documenter kit. I had no idea what I was going to use it for, and turns out my son tried lemons, and that was the perfect fit. I use these pink paisley labels. It's actually a 12 by 12 sheet. And it's got all these different colored labels on it. This is obviously cut down. So it's just a 12 by 12 piece of pattern paper with a bunch of labels on it. And so what I would do is cut them up and use that as a journaling spot on a photo. I also journaled directly on photos. So I used a rub-on here, a phrase sticker from an old Messy Box, and then I used this Sharpie pen to write directly onto the photo, and this persnickety photo paper is really great for writing on. Here again is the weather screenshot, and just a piece of chipboard from an old Messy Box. I really wanted to layer embellishments on top of one another like that, so I did that here and over here. And I really didn't do anything with this album. I just sat on it and then binge watched one weekend like Kelly Purkey videos, and so that really got me inspired to put this together and finish all the journaling and do the embellishing and things like that. And then this is another piece of ephemera. We went to the National Archives and we looked at the Declaration of Independence. So I attached an Avery Yell tab here so that you can pull it out. It actually folds out to like one of these big guys, and so I folded it the way that I wanted it to appear in my album and punched holes in it, and I kind of folded it over. This is the original seam, and then I kind of adjusted it so that I could punch holes in it, and then you can pull it out. One fun thing is, so we saw the Declaration of Independence at the National Archives, and then like 2 or 3 days later we went to Independence Hall in Philadelphia and saw the room that they signed in, and so that was totally unplanned, but that was pretty cool. Here's another rub-on, and just wrote with that Sharpie pen. This kind of gets into the heritage part of our trip. We did take this trip to do some heritage research. My husband and I really got into that when I was pregnant with my son. And so this is at the German Society in Philadelphia, where his family were members, and they lived in Philadelphia for a while. And when they came over from Germany, and they were business owners there. So we actually went to the German Society. It was really cool. To look at a scrapbook from 1924 to get some additional information about his grandfather. So these are, this is the obituary that we went there for, and it's all in German. This is what the scrapbook looked like. A guy that he was in like a singing club with kept this scrapbook, and my husband's great-great-grandfather was pretty well known and one of his personal friends. So we went to see the obituary and then to kind of get his handwritten notes. So I think I paid $10 to hang out in this beautiful library for at least 2.5, 3 hours, just like poring over the stuff. And the librarian was very helpful. We found this just by chance. I happened to know what he looked like, and so she was flipping through a book, telling me more information about the Zangerfest. I know I'm not saying that right. Like a German singing society. And as she flipped through this page, I said, "Oh, hey, wait, there he is!" And I got bonus materials from that visit just by happening to see his face. This German society was founded in 1764, and so these books are that old. And I just used an Ali Edwards messy circle stamp here, stamped it on vellum, and then attached it with the tiny attacher. And then here we are elsewhere in Philadelphia at the Reading Terminal Market for dinner. So here is just a 4x6 piece of pattern paper, and then I cut out from the bag where we got our dinner from Hunger Burger. Some more memorabilia. This is the little envelope that held our hotel key card. Here again is one of those pink paisley labels with a piece of chipboard. This is from the Ali Edwards Drive story kit. So just some photos of us out and about in Philadelphia. Our hotel was very close to the city hall. And then this, I have a photo here on this side, and didn't really have anything to go on this side. So I had the Studio Calico patterned paper. I have no idea what city skyline that is, and put these little stars from an old messy box on there, just as kind of a filler page. So here's another day in Philadelphia, more of our heritage. This is the Academy of Music on Locust, and my husband's great-great-grandfather was said to have done the ceiling work in here, and we actually know for a fact that he and his wife, the second great-grandparents, used to come here and see production. So it's pretty cool to have been in the German society where we knew they hung out, and then here at the Academy of Music to kind of be in the same place as these people 130 years ago is pretty cool. So just documenting that here on some pattern paper. And then another journaling card from In a Creative Bubble. We took these really low-res selfies throughout the trip. Usually they're backlit and it's just our silhouette, so a really crummy photo, but they're really special to me, and you'll see those throughout the album. Here we are elsewhere in Philadelphia, just kind of walking around. Here we are at Independence Hall. I have yet to finish this, and maybe you guys can help me out with this. This is in the signing room where they signed the Declaration of Independence, and each one of these tables is a different state. I thought it would be really cool to find some kind of diagram that showed which table was which state. I have yet to find that on Google, so if any of you know of anything like that, let me know. I'm such a nerd, and that's the only thing I want to include in that spot up there. Here we are at the Liberty Bell. This is another heritage kind of family research trip elsewhere in Philadelphia. So we're basically walking around all day. And so we went to the historic St. George's United Methodist Church. We found an old Sunday school log that noted that my husband's great-grandfather attended here when he came over from Germany. So we went and visited, and they were really cool and let us just kind of explore on our own. And then they gave us this little handout that I just put inside this 6x8 pocket. So that was pretty cool to see, and then just kind of have the freedom to roam around the church and the Sunday school buildings, and it's super old. This is a piece of vellum that I stamped these journaling lines on. This is from the Drive story stamp, and I just kind of journaled where we were and why. Later on, we went and visited some graves. So this was actually the second grave we visited. I included a 6x8 photo here of the headstone. I still have yet to like document about this and journal it. So I'll come back to that soon. This is the first grave that we visited, and I just kind of journaled about that here on this 4x6 card. My husband's second great grandmother on his other side was an undertaker, and ironically, she has no headstone here, so we're kind of surprised to learn that. If you do go to cemeteries and are looking for, like family research, and if you're a genealogist or doing genealogy studies like that, you probably already know this, but it's very helpful to call the office for the cemetery. They, most of the time, every experience that I've had, they're really helpful and want to help you find your loved ones' graves, and so they will really they will accommodate you if you reach out to them. Now, these are pretty cool. This photo was taken in Philadelphia. This is taken in Cherry Hill, New Jersey on the same night. We drove to a residence that we knew my husband's great-great-grandparents lived at, and he hopped out of the car, took a picture, and then what I did was washi taped that to the original photo of it in the 30s. I think that's when this one was taken, and then did a little journaling up top here on some old Maggie Holmes pattern paper, and I used the Old and New Story stamp from Allie Edwards. And then I did the same thing down here. So this is where my father-in-law was born in Cherry Hill. The original photo from the 40s, I have yet to journal here. And then this is what it looks like today with an addition. So just kind of a cool interactive thing, where you can see like side by side the old and the new. Here again, this is kind of out of order. We did all of this stuff before the grave site visits, and I just mapped where we walked in Philadelphia that one day, and then did a screenshot and printed it out on a 3x4 canvas here. Another screenshot of the weather, and then just a piece of pattern paper with a stamp on it noting where we were and our method of travel. And then just some more snapshots from Philadelphia. Here again is one of the pink paisley labels and then a cork sticker from an old messy box. So now we are getting onto our New Jersey, New York travels, and so this is kind of leaving Philadelphia and then going to the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. I cut down a page protector here just to get some additional photos. I do that frequently in these albums, and then I attached an Avery, actually I think this is even Office Depot brand label here so that you know that to flip this instead of just going to the next page. So another snapshot of the weather, and then a view of the Manhattan skyline from the ferry. So this, we weren't really looking for any family history in Ellis Island. This is in the registration room, I think it's called. And you can see here, I stamped directly on the photo with the moonlit white ink here, and it smeared, and this was from Persnickety Print, so I couldn't reprint it, and I decided to just go with it. It's not terrible, but I really, really liked this photo, and wanted to include it in here. So you can see I have some more journaling left to do in here. I still kind of have to work out how I feel about Ellis Island and everything that I learned while I was there. So there's some more photos, another cork sticker from Studio Calico, and some more pictures of the Statue of Liberty. Again, just another 4x6 photo with some basic gray pattern paper. And then this is something that I do frequently to include memorabilia towards the end of the album here. This is just a brown paper bag that probably some product came in. And what I did was I used these pink paisley labels and kind of folded them in half, adhered them to the bag, and then punched holes in them. So that's these are again from that 12 by 12 sheet. I put a basic gray sticker on here, and then inside are things like our parking pass from Liberty State Park, our tickets, some Ellis Island research information, and then just like the handouts that they give you. So I love keeping this stuff. I think it's so fun to look back at this, and I just wanted to go ahead and tuck that inside this bag here. Some more photos. And I will say I do not recommend the Elmer's Dot Runner adhesive. This is what it looks like, and it's on the pack it just says Dot Runner instead of permanent tape. And I don't know what it is, but like, this is not even a year old and it's already coming up. So I need to find a new rolling adhesive to get that down. A lot of photos from this outing that we did. And then on to the next morning in New Jersey, just visiting with some family. I used the business card from the diner that we had breakfast at, and then stamped some more onto this photo. This is another like heritage spread, and so this was kind of difficult to talk about. It's a difficult part of my family's history, and we went into a cemetery without contacting the office. They were very difficult to get a hold of. This is actually the guy that I'm speaking to now, like months and months later, and just trying to find a headstone for my great-grandmother, sorry. So basically, this was in Allentown on the way to Shamokin, where she's from, and I kind of told the story of us trekking through the cemetery. They had ice on the ground. We had a very heavy 14-month-old baby that we're kind of like toting. It was really cold, and I told that story here. We never did find her headstone, and I'm told now it's because she didn't have one. So what's pretty interesting is I stood here and took this photo because I liked the way that the row houses looked, like all the different colors with the, the cemetery in the foreground. And this is actually the area where she's buried without a marker on her grave. So that's really special to me. I also like to think about, I'm a nerd and I love old things and I love history. I love, love, love history. So it was really important for me to include some photos like this. So this is a shot down the street of where my great-grandmother lived in a coal mining town called Shamokin in Pennsylvania. And her residence was actually on the opposite side of the street, which is no longer there. But I think the 1920 census told me that she lived on this street. So what I did was took a photo looking down the street, just kind of imagining what her view of the mountains would have looked like, 100 years ago when she lived here. And I also kind of talked about that. Now, I did go over onto the back side of this card with my journaling, so I attached a tab here that says "Pull me out" so that you could read the rest on the back. This is just, this bottom photo is adhered to the back of this 6x8 photo. This is another kind of family history entry in Shamokin. So this is me standing in front of the building where I think my grandfather lived, and if not this building, then this building. We were able to determine kind of how he became separated from his mother and his family through an old newspaper article. It was something that he never ever talked about, and we actually found out about it on newspapers.com earlier this year or late last year. So I talked about that here on this journaling card, and then what I did was I printed out the newspaper article from that website and then kind of tucked it in here and then noted the paper that it came from and then what date in 1925, just to kind of give a little backstory to these photos and to that journaling. And then again, this is looking down the street from this building. So this is where my grandfather lived as a boy, and I just wanted to kind of take a picture of, potentially what he saw as a kid living there. Over here, I used some Maggie Holmes pattern paper, and loved this leather-looking paper from her Gather collection, and kind of ripped some pieces from here, and then used the tiny attacher to adhere them, and then wrote my journaling about this photo and this photo, and then used the Roots story stamp from Allie Edwards for that photo. So for this project, I really, really loved using the Allie Edwards story stamps for the more family history spreads, and then the Kelly Purkey travel stamps, actually any Kelly Purkey stamps for the more travel themed spreads. Now we're on to just more of the family vacation part, so some journaling about staying with friends and riding on the metro in DC, my son's first metro ride. Then we visited the Smithsonian Zoo, and here I have just another glassine bag with some additional photos in here that didn't make it into the pockets. And then I used some Kelly Purkey stamps, one of those Stamp and Cut labels from her stamp set. This was a piece of craft packaging that I just used a circle punch to cut out and then did some journaling there. Our next stop was in Maryland. We visited one of my husband's friends who has a brewery, and so just kind of hung out there for the evening, included their menu, backed it with some pattern paper to make it a little more durable in the album, and then just some journaling and like talked about what we were doing there and who we were with. If you are in Maryland, I highly recommend the Werdaka Brewery. If you're not into beer, they have some small plates and homemade sodas and things like that too. Next, the following Sunday, we were pooped. This was our last Sunday on the road, and I needed a nap, so my husband snapped this really sweet photo of my son and me napping after church. I used this washi tape, Days of the Week washi tape from A Beautiful Mess, and then this chipboard from an old messy box to kind of spell out this phrase, I love you Sunday. This is just a piece of pattern paper here, and then a business card from Potbelly where we had lunch at least once. Just a visit with friends here, so again that pattern paper, the messy circle stamped on top of vellum, and then fussy cut and attached with the tiny attacher. Later that night, we went to the Lincoln Memorial at about 9:30. I highly recommend going at night. It's really cool, and it's open, and there are way less people than during the day. So just a 6x8 photo of Abraham Lincoln there. And then again, our really grainy, dark family selfie in front of Honest Abe. This is some chipboard from a messy box from A Beautiful Mess. I think this was a September box. Another journaling card from In a Creative Bubble. I used, again, the screenshot to kind of tell the story of the weather, much warmer than the previous weekend we were there. And then here what I did was I used one of the messy circles, stamped it onto some cardstock and fussy cut it, and then I wrote my journaling onto just little strips of paper and then stuck it down instead of writing directly onto the photo. Next, talking about the Washington Monument, and we were good tourists and pre-purchased our tickets from their website, and then we got there and found out the monument was closed. So we did not get refunded for the tickets. That's kind of like the risk you run doing that. So I kind of joked with my husband and said I would attach them to our tax return for that year. There's some photos here. This photo was not filtered. That is just how beautiful the sky was that day. I can't believe it was just a beautiful winter morning when that was taken. So in lieu of visiting the Washington Monument, we then trekked over to the United States Holocaust Memorial. If you ever get a chance to go there, the museum is so excellently done. The attention to detail is wonderful, but it's pretty difficult not to go in there and cry when they just kind of lay out what happened during the Holocaust. And so I journal about that here, again using some vellum, a tiny attached to a 4x6 card from A Beautiful Mess. And then for this, what I did was I just stamped holes in an envelope. I stamped out using the Allie Edwards Roots Story stamp, Story of Yesterday, and only adhered about a third of it onto the flap of the envelope, so that kind of opens it. And then in the envelope are these passports that they give you in the museum, and it is the story of a real person who lived during the Holocaust. So I have my passport here, and then the one that my husband took, and they tell you the real-life stories of people who lived during the Holocaust. And fortunately, these two were able to get out of Europe and go someplace else to bypass the concentration camps. This is inside the museum. This I think is really one of the only photos that I took because it was so dark, first of all, but it's also so terrible and so sad. So this was basically just like a two-story break in the museum where they had natural light coming through, and it's just all framed photographs of people who lost their lives during the Holocaust. So I thought that was a pretty special installation there. Next, we were trekking around DC. I have yet to journal in here, but we wanted to take a picture of my husband in front of the last building that he built while he lived in the DC area. So that's what these two photos are about. And then we went over to Chinese place Miwa, I think that's how you say that, next door to that job site, and So I just kept the fortune that my son got in his fortune cookie, and Tiny attached it to a 3x4 card there. I used the Kelly Purkey Big Bite stamp set to stamp out #delicious onto some vellum, and then Tiny attached it to that photo of our food. And then kind of talked about our visit to the White House with, again, that in a creative bubble journaling card. And then we headed home, so some more of the New Adventure stamps, the Big Bite stamp from Kelly Purkey, or Food Coma stamps, some Allie Edwards stamps. This is from a messy box. Just kind of documenting our trip home. We were very tired and ready to get home. Again, a Drive story stamp, the pink paisley labels here with some chipboard from the Drive kit. My son ended up getting sick on the way back as a result of staying with that family in DC, and so my son got sick, and then my husband and I got sick, and we joke that a 9-month-old took down our whole family that weekend. So this is pretty special to me also. We were in St. Augustine on our way home, and we stopped at this restaurant called Full Service Gas Works or something like that. If you're in the St. Augustine area, I highly recommend it. My husband and I honeymooned in St. Augustine, and we ended up going here on our honeymoon and then bringing our son back 3 years later. So that was pretty funny. The food is excellent. The owner is wonderful. She's so nice and super accommodating, and so it's just a great place to visit. And then that's it. I finished off the album with this piece of paper from the Cool Kids collection from Crate Paper. I really liked the colors, and the map went well, I thought, with a travel album. So that is a look at my mini album. I call it a mini album. It's not very mini. It's actually huge. From my February 2016 Family History Heritage Road Trip. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below, and I will do my best to answer them. Even if you guys have any genealogy research questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I haven't done it in a while, and am interested to kind of dip my toe back into it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you later.